Although we were sad to leave Croatia, everyone was very excited to kick off a few weeks of fun in the UK. Stop number 1 was Cambridge, and on the first day we went punting. The punt is steered by the punters standing on the back of the boat and pushing it along with a large metal pole against the bottom of the river, which is quite shallow. You can rent one and try to steer it yourself, but we made the wise decision to go with a guide. This was a great move, especially because our guide told us that he sees tourists fall in the river all the time while trying to steer and keep their balance. We floated down the River Cam, which runs along the backs of all the beautiful schools in Cambridge, and learned about the student life and all the famous old buildings. Cambridge is a particularly sentimental stop for my dad, who spent a month at Selwyn College at Cambridge during his 4 years at USC. We stopped for a quick drink at the Anchor, which is one of the pubs he went to while he studied here. After that, we walked to Selwyn and the porter let us walk around inside for a few minutes. After a few more days of exploring the area, feeling like we were experiencing the world of Harry Potter in real life, and enjoying our favorite British sweets, it was time to head to London. There's a lot to see and do in London. Putting together an itinerary without missing anything is tricky, so we opted to do the hop-on, hop-off bus. Yes, this is very touristy, but it ended up being a really good idea as we were able to see many of London's main attractions from the top of the double-decker bus. We took a trip to the Crown Jewels inside the Tower of London, and because of COVID, there was no line to get in. Normally, it fills this whole queue. After that, my dad and I walked up into the famous Tower Bridge. Inside, there's a glass pane you can walk over, which is very scary considering how high up we were. It doesn't look intimidating from the video clips, but it took a bit of courage to cross over. There was a fantastic view from the top, but we didn't stay for too long because it was nerve-wracking being up that high. One of the other days in London, we went to the famous 261-year-old Hamleys toy store. After Hamleys, we walked around St. James Park, followed by a quick visit to Buckingham Palace. After Buckingham Palace, we took one of London's famous black cabs to Harrods, which is a beautiful department store that takes up a whole city block. They have everything from fashion and technology to a grocery store, but we spent most of our time inside the chocolate and candy section. The next day we went to the Museum of Brands and Advertising, and there we saw old ads and products from the early 1900s to now. The museum was close to Portobello Market, which is home to vintage clothing, food trucks, antiques, and more souvenirs. If you've seen the movie Notting Hill, you might also recognize the area from Hugh Grant's montage walking through the seasons of the year in the market. Later that night, we met two of my dad's cousins, Christian and Natasha, as well as Christian's daughter Purdy for dinner. The next morning, we set out for the Churchill War Rooms.
We visited the Churchill War Rooms, which was the real underground command center that Winston Churchill used in World War II. We got to see the preserved rooms, the living conditions, and facts about their everyday life in this bunker.
That evening, my mom and I took a walk through Hyde Park to get to the temporary live Van Gogh exhibit, which isn't unique to London, but we decided to go check it out. Here's my dad pretending to freak out over driving on the right side of the car and the left side of the road. This, of course, means that we picked up a rental car for the road trip portion of our UK visit. Stop number 1 was Ambleside, which was a cute little town in the English countryside. For a couple days, we enjoyed relaxing by the lake and slowing down after the busyness of London. After a couple days of lake chill time, we moved on to Wales, which is exciting because both my father and grandfather were born in Wales, but the rest of us had never been. On our way into Wales, we drove through this town that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. At 58 letters, it's the longest name for a town in Europe, and in English, it translates to the Church of Mary in the hollow of the White Hazel, near the fierce whirlpool, and the Church of Tessilia by the Red Cave. Stop number 1 in Wales was Conwy, where we found our favorite Welsh treat for the first time on a menu instead of having to make it at home from my grandmother's recipe. We just drove from England to Wales and we're stopping here in Conwy for breakfast, and we are so excited because look what they have on the menu. Welsh cakes with butter. One morning, we grabbed our umbrellas and walked along a little trail. Another stop on our road trip was a beach town called Aberystwyth. Even though it was cold and windy, there were still surfers in the water. Something we saw a lot of while driving for a few days were sheep. There are sheep everywhere, and they never ran from our car or got scared when we came near them.
This is us walking up to Kennan Castle, which is in southern Wales, and it's a place I've been a few times and I wanted to bring the kids back. Unlike the nicer, more restored places like Cardiff Castle or Harlech Castle, this is an old, craggy, messed up old place at the top of a hill surrounded by sheep, and you could really feel the old sort of windswept look to it. And you can imagine living up here and looking down from the battlements and thinking about people attacking you. Because apparently this place was captured and recaptured by the Welsh and English a few times. And today it's a fun little tourist spot. I highly recommend if you don't mind getting wet and avoiding the cows and the cow poop.
After bouncing around a few charming Welsh towns, we made our way down to Swansea. My parents had already been here a couple times, so it was nothing new for them, but it was really cool for Jack and I to come visit the city where my father was born and where my grandfather grew up. We also drove by my great-grandmother's old apartment building in Mumbles, which is a small neighborhood in Swansea. One night we stayed in Crickhowell, which is a very charming little Welsh village. We stopped by a pub called Treebeards, which, because we're Lord of the Rings fans, we absolutely loved. We stayed for a few hours and watched as both locals and newcomers all drank and laughed together.
We then went to Carefully Castle in Carefully. It was one of the coolest castles I've ever seen, and it was super cool to walk through. We got to go through pretty much every room in the castle and see how people lived back then. We also got to see siege equipment.
After Caerphilly Castle, we drove to Cardiff, where we stayed for a few days. There we visited yet another castle, and this one is called, you guessed it, Cardiff Castle. We found that the most interesting part of our visit to Cardiff Castle was the attention to detail and intricate decorations inside the main house. Every room had tons of small details and patterns on the walls and ceilings. Many of the door frames and bookshelves had animals carved into the wood. After walking through the house, we were able to go up into the main tower inside the castle walls, which gave us a perfect 360-degree view of everything around the fortress. After Cardiff, it was time to head back to England, and on the way, we stopped at Stonehenge.
So we just left the visitors center and we're going to Stonehenge. In front of me is Stonehenge, one of the world's oldest archaeological monument things. It has a lot of stones on top of other stones, and it appears some sheep have made themselves home here.
After Stonehenge, we made it to Oxford, where we stayed for a few nights.
So, me and my sister woke up this morning, and our parents were gone, and they've taken a day trip to the Cotswolds. So, me and my sister are walking around. We're gonna go to a market, and then we're gonna head back. So, we just made it to the covered market in Oxford. It was about a 20-minute walk from our place.
So Jack and I are currently walking back from the covered market, and we did not bring umbrellas, and it is raining, so you could say that Mom is probably the most prepared in this family, and this is a day without Mom. So we're getting rained on a little bit. Luckily it's not too bad. But Jack and I pretty much almost just got run over by a car, because even though we've been in the UK for probably like a couple weeks now, we're still kind of having some difficulties with the whole other side of the road thing. I'm looking to the right instead of the left when crossing the road. And although it is raining, we are still having a great day.
We're not.
And we're on our way back from the covered market, which was amazing. And we got some milkshakes, and I got this little veggie salad takeaway.
Where are we, Cindy?
Cotswolds, we're in Bibury,
And why does anybody care?
because it's impossible Cotswolds cuteness.
And that is apparently Arlington Row?
I thought it was Awkward Row.
No, it's on Awkward Hill.
Oh, Awkward Hill.
And this is described as the most beautiful, picturesque something or other in England, and is on the passport.
It's described as by Williams, from Williams something or other.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah.
And this is Arlington Row, which Cindy describes as what?
Impossible Cotswold cuteness.
No, you described it a moment ago as something else.
I don't remember. Oh, hobbity, very hobbity.
This is very hobbity. It's got tiny little doors. We are in beautiful Burton-on-Water, and so is everyone else in England, because they can't leave. But it's gorgeous. It's a funny little shallow stream. People walking around in it. Little shops. Cotswolds, very cute.
After a couple more days of exploring Oxford and even participating in a night of local pub trivia, it was time to head out. On the way to the airport, we stopped at Bletchley Park.
About an hour from London lies Bletchley Park. During World War II, this top-secret place was home to the codebreakers who famously broke the Germans' Enigma. We enjoyed walking around the campus where they lived and worked. We also got to see Alan Turing's bomb machine.
After Bletchley Park, we hopped on a plane to our next destination. Thank you everyone again so much for watching and following along. Stay tuned to see what we did next in Portugal.